My name is Samantha Williams, and I work as a graphic designer for a mid-sized marketing firm on the east side of the city. Most days, my world revolves around deadlines, color palettes, and clients who think make it pop is actual design terminology. The office itself is on the 12th floor of a glass and steel tower, a nice view, but not much else. I usually leave just after sunset, when the streets below are shifting from business suits to nightlife glitter. This night was no different, except I stepped out into the cool evening air, glad to be free of my desk, and that's when I saw him. A tall man stood near the curb, hands in the pockets of a dark, tailored coat. His build was lean but solid, the kind you'd expect from someone who either worked out regularly or never sat still. His dark hair was neatly combed back, his jaw sharp, and his eyes, gray, cool, and fixed entirely on me, were the kind of eyes that made you feel like he'd already weighed and measured you before you said a word. "Miss Williams?" he asked as I stepped onto the sidewalk. I stopped short, scanning him. He didn't seem threatening, but I still felt a small prickle of unease. I let my gaze flick to the right, toward the front doors of the building. The security guard was still there, leaning on the counter inside, visible through the glass. I calmed myself with the thought that if there was trouble, help was only a shout away. "Yes, that's me," I said cautiously. "Do I know you?" He took a step closer, not invading my space but making sure I could hear him over the hum of traffic. "My name's Jacob Cooper. May I have just a moment of your time? I think you deserve to see something." He motioned toward a concrete bench nearby, and I sat down with him beside me a respectable distance away. He glanced away for a moment, as if trying to gather his words. "This is awkward. I've been debating all afternoon whether to even approach you. I'm not here to cause trouble, but," he hesitated, his jaw tightening. "I'm engaged. Or I was. I began to suspect that my fiancé was cheating on me, and based on that feeling I hired a private investigator, which after some weeks he confirmed those suspicions. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked, confused. Jacob paused for a moment, opening a manila envelope that he had been holding. He removed several large photos and handed them to me. In them showed Rachel, Jacob's fiancée, and my boyfriend Thomas holding hands in one, kissing passionately in another, and several in the throes of passion in what looked like Thomas's bedroom at his apartment. The sound of traffic seemed to fade into a dull hum. My hands felt suddenly heavy, my heart seemed to stop. "This can't be true," I muttered, but the truth was staring me in the face. Jacob's expression softened, like he genuinely pitied me. "I know how it feels, and I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. That's why I wanted to tell you myself." I couldn't think of a response. I was somewhere between anger and disbelief, but my eyes kept drifting back to the photos in my hand. Jacob gave a slight nod, then said, "You can keep those, and I have included my contact information if you have any other questions or," he hesitated, "simply need someone to talk to." "I'm sorry," he said one last time, then turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the evening chill with proof that my relationship had just blown up in my face. I could still feel the echo of Jacob's voice in my ears as I pulled out of the parking lot. The image of those damning photos burned into my mind. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, knuckles pale in the fading evening light. Traffic was light, but my heart thudded like I was weaving through rush hour. Every red light gave me too much time to think, to replay the conversation, to hear again how Jacob had said, "I thought you deserved to know," in that measured, almost sorrowful tone. The sympathy in his eyes had felt genuine, which somehow made it worse. By the time I turned onto my street, the sun was dipping behind the rooftops, throwing the houses in golden shadow. My duplex sat at the far end of the block, porch light set to flicker on at dusk. But my chest tightened when I saw it, Thomas's car parked in my driveway. We had keys to each other's apartments, and he had let himself in like he always had. On any other day, the thought would have been comforting. Tonight, it felt like a weight pressing against my ribs. I pulled into the driveway and parked next to his white sports car, he always backed in and I always teased him for it, but now all I could think was it looked like he was planning a quick getaway. Unlocking the front door felt slower than it should have. The scent of the vanilla candle I'd left unlit this morning still lingered faintly in the air, mixing with the deeper, warmer trace of his cologne. He was sitting on the sofa when I stepped in, watching something on TV. "Hey Sam, how was your day?" he asked, like nothing was wrong. The words I'd rehearsed on the drive over evaporated. All I could hear was Jacob's voice, low and deliberate. "I thought you deserved to know." I dropped my purse onto the chair by the door, the sound sharper than I intended. My hands were trembling, but I curled them into fists so he wouldn't see. "Don't," I said, voice low but unsteady. "Just don't." He blinked. "Don't what?" The sheer calm in his tone, the unawareness, was like gasoline on a flame. "Don't pretend nothing's wrong, Thomas. Don't stand there acting like you didn't do exactly what you did." His brows drew together. "What are you talking about?" He took a cautious step toward me, palms open. "Samantha, I..." "Stop it." The word came out so loud it startled even me. My throat burned. "You don't get to stand there and lie to my face." Not after. I reached into my bag, my fingers closing around the envelope Jacob had given me, its edges soft from how hard I'd been gripping it. I pulled it out and threw it at him. It hit his chest with a dull smack before falling to the floor, spilling the glossy photos across the carpet like shrapnel. My breath was ragged. "Look at them. Look at what you've done." Thomas didn't flinch. "What are you talking about?" He replied confused. "Don't." My voice cracked. "Don't you dare try to explain. Just get out. Get out of my house." He froze for a second, staring at me like I'd just started speaking another language. Then, without arguing, he began gathering the scattered pictures, his hands moving slowly, like he was afraid any sudden movement might set me off further. When he finally stood, the stack of photos clutched tightly in his hands, his expression was equal parts hurt and bewilderment. He moved past me, grabbing his keys and jacket hanging by the door and left quietly, the door clicking shut behind him. The vanilla scent still hung in the air, but now it felt suffocating. I sank onto the sofa, my pulse pounding in my ears, the sound of his car pulling away leaving an awful silence in its wake.
What just happened? I muttered to myself. As I sat in my car still parked in Samantha's driveway contemplating my next move, I pulled away from her duplex, the echo of her voice still sharp in my mind. She'd been furious, hurt, even, and I didn't know why. But her words felt like a punch to the gut. I drove until I found a near-empty parking lot at a strip mall about a mile away and parked. I picked up the envelope and removed the photos and began to look through them. It looked like someone had been following me for several weeks. These were definitely photos of me, at all the places I had been in the last 3 weeks, including shots through the windows of my own apartment. But the woman, my thoughts drifted. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed and dialed. The phone rang twice before his voice came through, rough but familiar. "Thomas Hale," the voice bellowed through the phone. "You still alive?" "Hey Dane." My tone immediately put him on alert. "Are any of my favors with you still good?" Dane responded. "Brother, there isn't enough time left in this universe for me to ever repay you for the things you've done for me." His voice tried to sound jovial, but the seriousness of my voice had his full attention. "Tell me what you need." After another 10 minutes I hung up and sat there in my car for a moment telling myself this was going to be a long night.
I sat on the edge of the bed, the photos burned into my mind like scars I couldn't erase. The images Jacob had shown me, Thomas and Rachel together, felt like a knife twisting deeper with every heartbeat. I was convinced. The betrayal was real. The tears hit me without warning. One moment I was staring at the wall, the next my face was in my hands, shaking like I was coming apart. My chest felt crushed, like I couldn't pull in enough air. How could Thomas do this? How could someone I loved so completely look me in the eye and lie? The thought made my stomach twist until I felt sick. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, jolting me. I reached for it with trembling fingers. An unfamiliar number. Samantha. It's Jacob. I know you're hurting. If you want to talk, I'm here. My pulse jumped. I never saved his contact information. Thomas had taken the envelope with it when he left. But somehow Jacob had found a way to reach me. I hesitated, but in my mind, Jacob was no longer this stranger that had handed me the catalyst for the destruction of my relationship. He'd been blindsided just like me. His fiancée had betrayed him with my boyfriend. Our pain was the same. In a way, he was the only one who could understand exactly what I was going through. Before I could talk myself out of it, I typed, I don't know what to say. I can't stop thinking about it. About them. I stared at the words, my finger hovering over send. Then I tapped it, my heart thudding hard in my ears. The message went through instantly. I set the phone down, staring at the screen as if I could will his reply to appear. For the first time all night, I didn't feel entirely alone. The reply came faster than I expected. Can I call you? My stomach tightened, but I typed back okay. Almost immediately, my phone lit up with his name, well, the number, flashing across the screen. I pressed it to my ear, my voice unsteady when I answered. Hi. Hey, Samantha. His tone was soft, warm, so different from the raw anger I'd seen in his eyes outside my office. I wanted to make sure you're holding up. I know how hard this hits. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it myself. Hearing him say that made the knot in my throat worse. I don't think I've stopped replaying it since he left. It's like I keep hoping I'll wake up and find out none of it's real. I wish I could tell you it was, he said, his voice dipping lower. But it happened. And you don't have to go through it alone. If you want, I could come over. We could talk, maybe share a drink, just not sit in this pain by ourselves. The offer hung between us. I didn't answer right away. My mind spun. On one hand, the idea of having someone who understood felt like a lifeline. On the other, I wasn't sure I could handle seeing anyone, not yet. A long silence stretched, broken only by the faint sound of his breathing on the other end. Finally, I said quietly, I appreciate that. I really do. But I'm not ready to see anyone right now. I just need some time to get my head straight. Jacob didn't press. I understand. I'll be here when you're ready. His voice was steady, almost soothing, and for a moment I could imagine that he meant every word. We didn't hang up right away. Instead, we talked for a while about nothing in particular, little things, everyday things. The kind of small talk that doesn't really say anything but still fills the silence. Our voices stayed low, unhurried, circling around safe topics. It felt oddly comfortable, like leaning on a stranger in the middle of a storm. By the time we finally said goodnight, my voice felt lighter, my chest a little less tight. I told myself it was because I'd talked to someone who truly understood. I didn't question that maybe I'd let a stranger step a little too far into my life. The first time we met after that phone call, it was for coffee. A neutral place. A safe place. He was already at a corner table when I walked in, 2 cups waiting, one black, one exactly the way I liked it, though I was sure I hadn't told him. He smiled when I sat down, and for an hour we talked about everything but Thomas and Rachel. It was easy, almost suspiciously so, like we'd known each other longer than a few days. 2 days later, he invited me to lunch. The restaurant was small, tucked away from the main street, the kind of place where the waiters knew your name. We laughed over the menu, shared plates, and lingered long after our food was gone. I caught myself watching the way he listened, how his attention never seemed to waver. It felt grounding. By the weekend, we were having dinner. He picked me up that time, opening the passenger door like it was second nature. Conversation flowed over candlelight, his gaze warm but never overbearing. When he walked me to my door, he stood close enough that I could feel his breath when he said goodnight. I stepped back before he could lean in, not because I didn't like him, but because I wasn't ready. The next night, it was a movie at my place. He brought snacks, blankets, and a casual charm that made it feel like the most natural thing in the world. At one point, his arm brushed mine, lingering just long enough for me to notice. I shifted slightly, telling myself it was nothing. Over the next few days, the boundaries blurred. Another dinner. Another night in, this time at his apartment. He offered wine, and we sat close on his couch, knees almost touching. The pauses in our conversations grew heavier, his eyes holding mine a little too long. His compliments became softer, more intimate, how I looked when I laughed, the way I tilted my head when I was thinking. It wasn't forceful. Never that. But I could feel the slow, deliberate pull towards something physical. His hand would rest on mine a moment longer than needed, his knee would press lightly against mine, and there was always that question in his eyes, unspoken but clear. And each time, I'd smile, thank him for the evening, and go home alone, telling myself I just wasn't ready. Not yet. The next night had been pleasant enough, a movie, some light conversation afterward, nothing too heavy. We were walking along the quiet stretch of shops near the theater, streetlights casting pools of yellow across the sidewalk. Jacob's hands were in his coat pockets, his tone easy and unhurried. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down, slowing his steps. A flicker of something passed across his face before he slipped the phone back into his pocket. I couldn't help but notice. "What is it?" "Nothing," he said quickly, but his voice carried the weight of a lie. I frowned. "Jacob." He stopped walking, looking at me for a long moment, as if deciding whether to speak. "I don't want to do this to you," he said finally. "Not tonight. You've been doing better." My stomach tightened. "Just tell me." With a slow breath, he pulled out his phone and unlocked it. "I just got these. I didn't want you to see them. But, you should know." 2 photos filled the screen. Thomas sitting at a cafe, leaning toward Rachel. Her face lit up in a smile, her hand grazing his. Another shot caught them walking away together, close enough that their arms brushed. The air seemed to drain out of my lungs. "When was this?" "This afternoon," Jacob said softly, almost apologetically. I handed the phone back with shaking hands. "I want to go home." Jacob didn't argue. He just walked me to my car, said to get some rest, and watched me drive away. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the images replaying over and over. Each time, the heat in my chest burned hotter, anger, humiliation, the gnawing need to prove that Thomas wasn't the only one who could move on. I woke up with the same knot in my chest I'd gone to sleep with. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Thomas and Rachel, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. By the time sunlight spilled through my blinds, the hurt had hardened into something else. Something hotter. I reached for my phone without hesitation. "Dinner tonight?" I typed. Jacob replied almost instantly, named the time. We didn't need to talk about what would happen after. I already knew. He probably did too. By evening, I stood in front of my mirror, fastening the last clasp of my garter belt. My dress was black, cut high enough to show just a hint of the lace when I moved. My heels made my legs look longer, my walk slower. I wanted to look powerful. I wanted to look like I wasn't breaking inside. But the truth was, I was dressing for war. A private, intimate war. If Thomas could find comfort in someone else's arms, so could I. I felt the cool night air on my bare skin where the dress ended, the faint brush of lace against my thigh with every step. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about comfort. It was about making sure Thomas never had the satisfaction of thinking I was still his. Jacob's car parked in the driveway of my duplex right on time. I stepped outside, grasping my small black clutch in one hand, the cool night air skimming over my stocking-encased legs where the hem of my dress ended. He got out to open the passenger door, and for a second he just looked at me. His eyes traveled slowly, taking in the cut of my dress, the glimpse of lace at my thigh when I moved. A faint smile tugged at his mouth, the kind that felt both flattering and dangerous. "You look incredible," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Thank you," I murmured, sliding into the seat, the scent of his cologne wrapping around me. He didn't start the car right away. His hand rested on the steering wheel, his gaze still fixed on me. "You know," he said after a beat, "we don't have to go to dinner. We could skip straight to my place, order something in?" The suggestion hung in the air, heavy with implication. My pulse thudded in my ears, and for a moment I thought about pretending I hadn't heard him. But I had dressed for this, hadn't I? For control, for revenge, for the satisfaction of making my own choice. I looked at him, at the glint in his eyes, and felt that familiar mix of hurt and anger rise in my chest. "Yeah," I said finally. "Let's do that." His smile widened just enough to show he'd expected my answer all along. The car eased out into the street and soon the city lights were sliding past the windows, and with each turn, I felt myself moving further from the girl who had cried herself to sleep the night before, and closer to the woman who was about to cross a line into my new life.
I sat in the driver's seat of a black sedan, chosen carefully for its color and low profile. The kind of car that disappeared into the night, and one neither Jacob nor Samantha would ever recognize. It was just another common car parked in the dark, allowing me to observe without being seen. Half a block down from Jacob's place, I parked in shadow, far enough to stay unseen but close enough to see everything. My hands rested lightly on the steering wheel. Waiting. My phone buzzed, single text. "They're on their way. 10 minutes. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, leaned back, eyes scanning the quiet street, watching the glow of the street lamps reflect off the pavement. There they were. Almost exactly 10 minutes after receiving the text message, the headlights of Jacob's car came into view. I watched as the car pulled into his driveway and quietly opened my car door and began my approach using the darkness to my advantage. Jacob had exited his vehicle and walked around the back of his car, focused on his passenger, oblivious to what was coming. As Jacob's hand reached for the passenger door, I closed the remaining distance in a few confident strides. I moved up behind him, letting him catch the edge of my presence from the corner of his eye. His hand froze midair. Slowly, he turned to face me, and in that moment, the casual confidence he'd worn all week faltered. There was recognition, yes, but also hesitation, just enough to make it clear he hadn't anticipated this. "Hello, Jacob," I said, my voice low but firm. He barely had time to react before my fist drove into his stomach. The wind knocked out of him, doubling him over. I followed immediately with a knee to his chin, but not enough force to break the bone or draw blood, my attacks measured and precise. I straightened him again and struck another blow into his midsection, causing him to gasp for breath as he crumpled to the ground beside his car. Samantha's face appeared in the passenger window, eyes wide, realization hitting her like a jolt. Panic flickered across her features, and she tried to scramble out of the car. Her movements were frantic. I watched in mild amusement as the car door swung out as she pushed against it, hitting Jacob repeatedly in the back of the head and shoulders. Each impact made a harsh sound, and though I hadn't intended it, it didn't matter. Finally, realizing what she was doing, frantically leapt to the driver's seat and opened the driver door to escape the car. Samantha ran around the front of the car, as fast as her heels would allow, her eyes blazing, hands out as if to shove me away. "What the hell, Thomas? Are you insane?" She slammed against me with everything she had, but I didn't budge. My body stayed solid, anchored, completely unmoved by her frantic push. "You're a psycho," she yelled, taking a step back. Her phone was already in hand, fingers hovering over the screen. "I'm calling the police." "No need," I stated matter of fact, gently taking the phone from her. "They're already here." At that moment, headlights swept the street, flooding the neighborhood with blue and red. Lights, but no sirens. I watched Samantha's face turn from rage to complete confusion. 2 police cruisers and 2 unmarked FBI sedans stopped in front of the duplex. 1 in the driveway, 2 at the curb, and the 4th in the middle of the street. An FBI agent in a dark suit stepped out of the lead sedan, his eyes scanning the scene until they locked on me. He moved with purpose, no hesitation. "Thomas Hale?" he asked, voice steady but firm. I gave a single nod. He turned slightly and gestured to the second agent, who came forward without a word, taking position at my side. Then he looked down at the groaning form of Jacob Cooper and looked back at me. "Really?" he said, a measure of irritation in his voice. He motioned the second agent, and I was escorted into the back of one of the patrol cars. As I sat back in the seat, I contemplated the events of that week leading up to this moment, and finally allowed myself to relax and actually smiled to myself. As far as I was concerned, the long night was over.
I'd been pacing for what felt like hours, the dull gray carpet swallowing the sound of my heels. The table sat in the center of the room like some kind of trap, 2 chairs on either side, a mirror on the wall that I knew damn well wasn't just a mirror. On the table, 2 bottles of water, still cold with condensation pooling at their bases. My thoughts were a storm, worry for Jacob twisting in my chest, rage for Thomas boiling hotter with every lap I made from wall to wall. I kept seeing it over and over again, the moment Thomas appeared out of nowhere, the way he hit Jacob without a word. That smug control in his face, like he owned the whole damn night. I clenched my fists, my heart pounding. Jacob didn't deserve this. None of it. And Thomas, whatever game he thought he was playing, had gone too far this time. The sound of a latch turning broke the heavy silence. The wooden door swung inward, and 2 women stepped inside, both wearing dark, fitted suits. The taller of the 2, mid-40s with jet black hair pulled back into a tight bun, closed the door behind them. "I'm Special Agent Tabitha Reyes," she said evenly. The other, younger, with sandy blonde hair neatly tucked behind her ears, moved toward the table and set a slim folder down. "Special Agent Jessica Miller," she added, her tone softer. Reyes studied me for a moment, then asked, "Can we get you anything? Water? Coffee? Tea?" I shook my head quickly. "No, I'm fine. I want to know what's going on. Where's Jacob? Is he okay?" My voice cracked slightly despite the edge in it. Miller gave a small, unreadable smile before taking a seat. Reyes gestured toward the empty chair across from them. "Please have a seat, Ms. Williams. We'd like to ask you a few questions and get a statement about what happened." "What happened was that my ex-boyfriend cheated on me, then mercilessly beat my—" I hesitated, almost saying boyfriend but quickly saying Jacob. Reyes nods understanding, then leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped loosely on the table. "Let's start at the beginning, Ms. Williams. How did you meet Jacob?" I blinked, caught off guard by the question. "What does that have to do with anything?" I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to focus. I explained when we first met outside my office building, how he had shown me photos of Thomas and Rachel together. Miller nodded, jotting something down. "And you started seeing each other after that?" "Yes," I said, shifting in my chair. "Coffee first, then lunch a few days later. Dinner, movies. It just clicked, you know, having shared a common betrayal." He was kind, funny, easy to talk to. My chest tightened as I added, "He didn't deserve what Thomas did to him." Reyes' expression didn't change, but her eyes stayed locked on mine. "You trust Jacob?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. Why wouldn't I? Neither of them said anything right away, and the silence seemed to grow heavier by the second. Reyes placed several photos across the table, her movements deliberate. "Ms. Williams, I'd like you to take a look at these." I frowned, hesitating. The glossy prints photos Jacob had shown me before, the ones that had shattered my trust in Thomas, laid before me once again. "Do you recognize them?" Reyes asked. "Yes," I said quietly, my stomach tightening. "These are what Jacob showed me." "Proof? Proof of what?" Miller's tone was even, but her eyes were sharp. "That Thomas was seeing another woman." My voice was edged with bitterness. Reyes nodded slightly. "Take a closer look at the backgrounds," she said. "Anything look familiar to you?" I picked up one photo, then another. My eyes roamed over the blurred figures behind them, the half-seen street signs, the faint outlines of a cafe logo. Something about it tugged at my memory, but I couldn't place it right away. Think carefully, Reyes urged. Not about them, about where they are. I swallowed, looking again, my confidence starting to waver. Reyes studied me for a moment, then grabbed another stack of prints. She placed them on the table beside the ones Jacob had shown me days ago. I glanced down and froze. The settings were identical, the angles the same, but the woman in these wasn't Rachel. It was me. How about these? Reyes pointed to the new set of prints. Recognize anything? My breath caught. I remembered now. The places Thomas and I had been, the new restaurant we wanted to try, the street vendor's cart with the green awning. A little coffee shop sign I knew by heart. My pulse picked up. We'd been there, Thomas and I, too, maybe 3 weeks ago. I remembered the heat of the day, the smell of fresh bread drifting out from the bakery. The clarity struck me. I had been so angry at Thomas that I couldn't see it, and now a slow, uneasy feeling crept in. These weren't random snapshots. They were moments I knew, places Thomas and I had been only 2 or 3 weeks ago. Who took these? I could barely whisper. Miller leaned forward, her voice calm but steady. We believe Jacob Cooper followed you and Mr. Hale for weeks, Ms. Williams. We also have evidence that he took these photographs using some high-end photography equipment as well as a drone. Reyes picked up one of the altered prints, then laid it next to its original counterpart. Afterward, he manipulated them, using a sophisticated AI Photoshop program replacing your images with that of a fictional woman. The words hit me like a cold wave. My gaze darted between the 2 sets of photos, my stomach turning. All week, I had been certain I'd seen the truth. Now, I wasn't sure of anything at all. What about those photos he showed me on his phone just the other night? I countered. Agent Jessica Miller pulled out a document. Apparently once Cooper had enough images of an individual, in this case Thomas Hale, the program he used could easily manufacture him in any situation without having to take any more actual pictures and make it believable enough for a phone image. So Thomas didn't cheat on me? My voice trembling. Agent Reyes shrugged. Not with this woman. Tapping her finger on an image of Rachel. She does not exist in real life. I sat back in my chair, the photos blurring in my vision as my throat tightened. My mind kept flipping through the last week, Jacob's sympathetic smile, the careful way he'd listened, the comforting texts late at night. Every word, every gesture, had been designed to pull me closer while tearing Thomas and I apart. Recognizing my state, Agent Miller slid a bottle of water toward me while Agent Reyes pushed a garbage can with her foot to the base of my chair. I looked at both, contemplating whether to vomit or pass out. I chose the water and somehow remained conscious. I tore my eyes away from the photos long enough to look at them both. Why? My voice cracked on the word. Why would someone go to all this trouble? Follow me for weeks? Make all this up? Reyes didn't hesitate. Because Jacob Cooper is a predator, Ms. Williams. Miller leaned forward, her expression unflinching. He targets vulnerable women, women he believes he can manipulate. He inserts himself into their lives, isolates them, and then breaks apart their relationships. Once the trust is gone, he moves in. I felt sick eyeing the garbage can at my feet again. You're saying I was just a target, Reyes said softly but firmly. One of many. The words hit harder than any of the photos had. All this time, I'd thought Jacob was helping me, that he cared. Instead, he'd been circling me like a vulture, waiting for the right moment to strike. Ms. Williams, I need to ask an uncomfortable question and need you to be completely honest with me. I looked up from cradling my head in my hands as if trying to keep it from bursting apart. What now? Reyes looked at me almost apologetic. We need to know if you have had sexual relations with Jacob Cooper. She asked, voice flat. I froze, my mind snapping around the question. What do you mean, physical? I asked, my voice sharp. Are you asking if I had sex with him? I shook my head, incredulous. And you think that matters? My voice rising with anger. Rhea's tone was steady but patient. We understand how sensitive it is, but it is pertinent to this investigation. I let out a slow, frustrated breath, staring down at the table. The anger, the betrayal, the confusion, they all surged at once. No, I finally said, defeated. Reyes and Miller nodded, letting me speak. I was too hurt at first. Too angry. Thomas he had betrayed me, or at least I thought he had. And Jacob, he was there, comforting me, listening to me, being kind. My fingers trembled slightly as I traced the edge of the table. Tonight was supposed to be the night. I had made up my mind. I thought I could. I don't know, take control of my anger, my heartbreak. That's why I dressed the way I did, why I agreed to go back to his place. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of it press down on me. The betrayal, the manipulation, the false sense of power I'd clung to, it all came crashing in at once. I had been so sure I was acting out of my own choice, my own rage, and yet, looking back, I realized how completely Jacob had orchestrated it. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. My chest tightened. I had been used, not just misled, but used. And now the full extent of it was settling in, suffocating in its clarity. Why does it matter? I asked, feeling an exhaustion settle over me. Reyes and Miller looked at one another, silently debating whether to continue or conclude the interview. I caught the look and snapped at them. Just tell me, how much worse could it possibly get? Miller took over, her voice steady but firm. Jacob is HIV positive. He has AIDS, and we have evidence of an intent to infect as many women as he can. There are dozens of victims in 4 different states, and every sexual encounter that we can confirm can be used in federal court as an attempted murder charge against him. My stomach dropped. My hands shook as the weight of the revelation pressed down on me. The photos, the manipulation, the entire week, I had thought it was about heartbreak and jealousy. I hadn't even imagined the danger had been real, that Jacob had a darker agenda entirely. Tears burned my eyes, and a sick feeling coiled in my gut. The betrayal was more than emotional now, it was physical, dangerous, and terrifying. Why? Was all I could manage to ask as I finally broke down sobbing. Agent Reyes' emotionless gaze actually wavered a moment when she replied. I am afraid that is way above our pay grade. Psychologists, psychiatrists, and counselors will be debating over Jacob Cooper's mental state for a very long time. Agent Miller reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. You need to remember that none of this is your fault. He has been doing this for a very long time and has become very good at it. You had an angel watching over you tonight. An angel, the statement struck through to my heart, Thomas, my guardian angel. All of a sudden, all I could think was how I betrayed him. He is never going to forgive me for this. I muttered through tears as the crushing reality came rushing back. I wouldn't be too sure of that. Reyes said with a small smirk and a knowing glance that hid another secret about to be laid bare. I was too terrified to ask and just looked at them with a wide expectant expression, hoping they would continue. It seems Thomas Hale did not take to being falsely accused of cheating very well. He apparently launched an investigation of his own. Reyes continued. Then tipped us off when he discovered there were other victims in multiple states. Jacob Cooper was under investigation in Idaho by local authorities who were not aware of the full extent of his crimes. Miller added. We took up the investigation and were close to an arrest, but your ex-boyfriend moved too soon and nearly compromised the operation. But in the end it all worked out and Cooper will be facing hundreds of charges, both federally and locally throughout several states. Well, he will once he recovers from his injuries. Agent Reyes said dryly. Is Thomas here? Can I see him? My hopes soar for a brief moment, hoping somewhere in the back of my mind that I could make things right between us. He is to be interviewed in the other room just momentarily. Would you like to watch? Reyes offered. All I could do was nod silently and was then led to another room that looked into an adjacent room separated by a one-way mirror. On the other side of the glass, Thomas sat across from an FBI agent, his hands folded neatly on the table. His posture was impeccable, composed, every movement deliberate. Even under questioning, his gaze never wavered, calm and measured.
The FBI agent was in his mid-40s and looked like a man accustomed to being in control. The agent leaned back in his chair, flipping open a thick file with a deliberate slap against the table. His eyes locked on mine, cold and probing, as if he was waiting for me to flinch. Thomas Hale. He paused. Assault and battery, illegal surveillance, and interfering in a federal investigation. He paused. Anything to say? You're welcome, I retorted, keeping my face expressionless. You worked him over pretty good. He continued, still studying me. I could have done far worse, but didn't want him bleeding on me, you know. His jaw tightened, as if trying to hide a smile. You were looking at some serious time. I leaned forward, placing my forearms on the table, hands balled into fists with my wrists together, and stared him straight in the eye. Arrest me then. Just like that. The agent questioned. If it gives you another gold star for your lapel, then by all means. I remained emotionless. Not very cooperative, are you? I thought we were on the same side. The agent leaned forward slightly. We are. I responded. Just pursuing different goals. And just what are those goals? The agent's curiosity getting the better of him. I continued. You spend time, money, and resources gathering evidence, hoping to get enough to make an arrest, and then hoping again it will be enough to get a conviction. My goal was simply to protect Samantha from that sorry excuse of a human being. I wasn't absolutely certain, but I had thought I had heard a faint sob from the other side of the glass behind the FBI agent. You nearly upended a federal investigation when you moved on him tonight. That alone carries enough weight for some serious time. The agent said offhandedly. I moved on him because I knew you would have allowed that pig to have sex with Samantha, just so you could have more charges to throw at him, whereas I was not willing to allow that to happen. I stated matter of fact, definitely hearing another sob from the adjoining room. So are you going to read me my rights now? Well, here's the thing, the agent said finally, voice edged with dry amusement. The assistant U.S. attorney, the one who actually decides if we drag you into court, doesn't feel like pressing charges. He smirked, snapping the file shut. Considering the circumstances. He stood, tucking the file under his arm. Still, you're not off the hook. We don't like people taking justice into their own hands. It messes with our paperwork. He gave me a last once-over, smirk back in place. But if you walk out of here without handcuffs today, maybe take that as a hint to go home and sleep it off. Without waiting for a response, the agent headed for the door, leaving me alone with the hum of the ventilation system and the faint buzz of the overhead lights. The holding room door opened, and the agent with the stone face stepped aside. You're free to go, he said flatly. I stood, no hesitation, no wasted motion. The hall outside was lined with tired fluorescent lights humming overhead, and at the far end stood Samantha. Reyes and Miller lingered close by, watching her like they weren't sure if she would vomit or collapse. Her eyes found mine immediately. They were rimmed red, her posture brittle, like someone carrying too much weight on the inside. For a long moment, neither of us moved, then hurled herself at me, embracing me in a hug. The FBI agents exchanged a glance, then Reyes cleared her throat. We'll arrange a ride for both of you, she said. Safer that way. Outside, the night air hit cold and sharp. A government sedan waited at the curb, windows tinted, engine idling. The driver opened the rear door, and I stepped aside, letting Samantha slide in first. She didn't look at me, not directly, but I felt the tension vibrating off her. I followed her into the back seat, the door shutting with a heavy finality. The car pulled away from the curb, the silence thick, only broken by the hum of the engine. She shifted in her seat, arms crossed tight, staring out the window as if the glass might give her answers. The ride was quiet, only the hum of the tires filling the space between us. Samantha sat turned toward the window, shoulders trembling. I didn't push. After everything, words could wait. When she finally broke, it came out in a flood, apologies, sobs. words tangled together as she begged for forgiveness. Her voice was raw, stripped bare of all the anger she had thrown at me the past weeks. Thomas, I'm so sorry. I believed him. I let him twist everything. I pushed you away, and, God, I didn't even give you a chance. Her hands shook as she tried to wipe at her tears, as if she could erase them as easily as Jacob's lies. Please forgive me. I don't know how to fix this. I let her finish. Then I reached over, covering her hand with mine. Steady. You don't need to fix anything, I told her. My voice stayed calm, because one of us had to be. This wasn't your fault, Samantha. Jacob did this. He's the predator, not you. You were hurt, and he saw that and used it. You're the victim here. This isn't your burden to bear. You're not angry with me? She managed between sobs. No, I'm not angry, I said, putting my arm around her. I will be honest, it hurt when you threw me out. Somewhere in my mind, I had envisioned us talking through this and both of us discovering what this was about together, but I can't say if someone had shown me this kind of evidence about you that I would not have reacted the same way. Leaning against my shoulder, Samantha suddenly looked up at me. How did you know about tonight? I wasn't even sure what I was going to do, not until I got in the car with him. So how did you know when to be there? I looked into her eyes, wishing she hadn't asked that question, at least not so soon. I'm not sure I should answer that, Sam. You have been through a lot, and I don't want to give you an actual reason to hate me again. She looked at me with a renewed sense of curiosity. After everything that I have been through this last week, I doubt I could ever be mad at you ever again. After you threw me out, I began, my voice low but calm. I looked through those photos he gave you. I knew something was wrong, but you wouldn't hear it from me. So I made a call. An old friend who owed me a favor, I continued. He had someone outside your place within 2 hours watching and following you, keeping in contact with me, especially when you met with Jacob. Whenever he decided to make his move, I was positioned to intervene, whether it was your place, his, or some random location. Her breath caught, half gasp, half disbelief. But the times we spend at his place or at mine? Well, I said, Jacob made it easy by leaving his contact information along with those photos that he had given you. So a simple search gave us all we needed. We broke into his apartment and placed surveillance equipment, cameras, and microphones. And my apartment? Samantha asked cautiously. I turned and smiled at her. I still have my key. So I still have cameras and microphones in my place. She asked anxiously. No, they were taken out immediately after the arrest. Since the FBI had no need to enter your home, it made it easy, I said with a sense of amusement. Samantha looked at me with this expression I could not quite interpret, maybe a mix of horror and respect, and then said, Would you please stay with me tonight? She seductively placed her hand on my leg. I gently moved her hand from my leg, but continued to hold it. I don't think that would be a good idea. The look of disappointment washed over her. I don't want to lose you, I can't. She pleaded. You won't, I answered. We just need time to get beyond all this, to heal. Besides, you didn't dress like that for me, did you? I nodded toward her outfit. No, she responded, tears falling again. I'm so sorry. I shook my head reassuringly. I am not going anywhere, but I think we just need time before jumping right back in bed again. I put my arm around her and held her close as the sedan continued its journey home. The long night was finally over.
Back an hour in time at the station, Samantha sat rigid in the observation room, Reyes and Miller flanking her in silence. The sterile light washed over Thomas as he remained perfectly composed in the chair, unmoved by the agent's posturing, his hands folded neatly on the table. She expected fire in his eyes, some flash of arrogance, maybe even guilt, but there was nothing. Just a steady calm that unnerved her more than the agent's threats had. When the agent finally stood, dismissing him with sarcasm and annoyance, Thomas didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He didn't even nod. He just was. Samantha felt her chest tighten. Rage, confusion, and something deeper, an ache she didn't want to name, pulled her in opposite directions. This was the man she had screamed at, shoved, called a psycho. The man she'd convinced herself had betrayed her. And here he was, silent and unshaken, while the FBI itself treated him as if he were the only steady thing in the room. Her throat closed, and she whispered before she could stop herself, Oh God, what have I done? Reyes looked at me, letting her facade slip just slightly. Let's get you home. The ride home was revealing as Thomas explained what had happened during the time I had thrown him out to the confrontation early this night. I listened in rapt attention as he explained how he had watched the entire time, poised to strike if Jacob tried to cross Thomas's red line in the sand. After he finished, I sat there in a numb shock. Who was this person? What happened to the quiet, easygoing boyfriend I thought I knew? Here beside me was this mastermind who not only assessed the threat to me then, not only kept tabs on me keeping me from danger but then acted on it when that same danger presented itself. Who are you? I asked Thomas with a mixed feeling of horror and absolute respect. I never imagined you could be so calculating. He answered simply that those attributes were always there, I just never needed to see them until now. I asked him to come over but he refused, causing me to break down sobbing again, but he quickly explained that he believed we just needed time to reconnect after everything that had happened over the last week and that jumping back into bed would not be the best idea. I understood and changed tactics and simply asked if he would like to come over and just talk, and he agreed. Upon arriving, I immediately changed clothes, out of the sexy dress and lingerie I had worn for another man out of spite and rage into sweatpants and a hoodie that Thomas had bought for me some time ago. We ordered Chinese takeout and sat on the couch watching some popular series, then eventually fell asleep right there, and as I dozed off, the feeling of absolute calm and safety washed over me as the exhaustion of the last week claimed my consciousness.